What if your healing isn't loud? What if it doesn't come with fireworks or grand announcements, but whispers in silence, shifts in your soul, and choices no one else can see? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But what happens when you do make it conscious? What if you've already healed more than you realize? In this video, we're not chasing surface-level signs. We're diving into the subtle, the sacred, the transformations that signal your soul is rising from the ashes of old pain. These are not just emotional improvements. They are initiations, inner alchemies, proof that your past no longer holds the pen. If you've ever wondered whether your healing is real, if you've ever questioned whether you've truly changed, this message is for you. Because sometimes the most powerful shifts are the quietest. And once you recognize these 7 signs, you'll know you didn't just survive, you evolved. There comes a moment, rare and almost imperceptible, when chaos no longer commands the stage inside. No alarms, no fireworks, just a subtle stillness, like the soft exhale of a storm that's finally passed. This is not the peace that demands attention. It's the peace that simply is. For many, healing is mistaken for a grand transformation. But in Jung's depth, psychology, true healing is often silent. It's the absence of resistance, the end of internal noise. You'll know you've reached this stage when you no longer feel the need to react to every emotional ripple. You stop chasing closure. You stop rehearsing the pain. Instead, you witness your thoughts without drowning in them. This is what Jung referred to as the beginning of individuation, the unification of opposites within. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole, and in wholeness, peace is no longer a destination. It becomes your baseline. Think back to the times when your nervous system was always alert, scanning the room, reading between lines, waiting for the next emotional landmine. If that hypervigilance has faded, even just slightly, that's not just progress, that's a sacred marker of healing. When the body no longer expects attack and the mind no longer anticipates betrayal, you are returning to your natural state, inner harmony. This peace doesn't mean you never feel pain again, but it means the pain no longer defines you. You carry it like a memory, not a wound. There's room inside you now, for joy, for boredom, even for uncertainty. And when silence enters your space, you no longer rush to fill it, because finally, the silence feels safe. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." When peace returns, it's because the looking has shifted inward. You've stopped trying to control the external world, and you've begun harmonizing your inner world. That quiet sense of calm, that's not the end of healing. That's the evidence it's already underway, deeper than you realize. There was a time when every decision felt like a battlefield, your heart pulling one way, your mind another, and your trauma screaming from the sidelines. But one of the clearest signs you've finally healed is when you start choosing differently, not because you force yourself to, but because you genuinely want to. The old patterns lose their grip, the unconscious compulsions soften, and suddenly, what once felt impossible becomes effortless. This is the soul's quiet revolution. You're no longer choosing from fear, guilt, or survival. You're choosing from clarity, from presence. Jung taught that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. But once you've walked through the shadow, once you've sat with your unmet needs and listened to their cries, you stop being a puppet of the past, and your choices become aligned with your higher truth. You'll notice this shift in the subtle ways you respond to life. You walk away from what drains you, not out of bitterness, but because your energy is sacred now. You say no without over-explaining. You no longer chase what's unavailable. You don't abandon yourself just to be accepted. These aren't rules you force yourself to follow. They're boundaries that arise naturally because you know who you are now. Healing doesn't make you superhuman. It makes you sovereign. You still feel the pull of old habits, but you don't indulge them. Not out of repression, but out of recognition. You see them clearly, and you simply choose differently. There's no inner debate, no bargaining, just a quiet, empowered knowing. This no longer resonates with who I am becoming. This is the turning point. When choice becomes a reflection of self-worth, not a reaction to wounding, you're no longer trying to prove anything. You're just living in alignment. And that right there is the fruit of deep healing. When the old you would have begged to be chosen, and the healed you chooses yourself without apology. One of the most unexpected and profound signs of true healing is this. You begin to feel compassion for the one who hurt you. Not because what they did was right, not because you're excusing their behavior, but because your vision has expanded. You no longer see them as a villain. You see them as a human, flawed, wounded, operating from their own unconscious pain. And in that recognition, something alchemical happens. Carl Jung often reminded us that what we reject in others is a reflection of what we haven't yet accepted within ourselves. When we're still hurting, we need someone to blame. The wound demands a perpetrator. But as the healing deepens, your need for justice transforms into a desire for peace. You realize that holding onto hatred binds you far more than it punishes them. And so forgiveness is not weakness. It's a form of inner liberation. This doesn't mean inviting them back into your life. It means detaching from the energetic grip they once had over you. You no longer think of them with venom. You think of them, if at all, with neutrality, sometimes even sorrow, because now you can see the little child inside them too, the one who never learned how to love without control, how to speak without harm, how to exist without projecting pain. This level of compassion doesn't come from bypassing the wound. It comes from having fully faced it. From crying the tears, raging at the injustice, screaming into the void, and coming out the other side lighter. Not because you forgot, but because you integrated, because you turned the wound into wisdom. True healing reveals that what you once called weakness, compassion, is actually your highest strength. You've become the one who ends the cycle, the one who no longer poisons themselves with resentment. And that quiet blessing you send toward their soul, even if only in a whisper, is proof that you are no longer who you used to be. There was a time when being triggered meant spiraling, losing control, shutting down, lashing out, or drowning in shame. But one of the clearest signs you've truly healed is when those same triggers become teachers. They don't disappear entirely, but they no longer hijack your reality. Instead, they arrive as sacred messengers, revealing what still desires attention, presence, and love. Jung taught that the shadow holds the parts of ourselves we have disowned, rejected traits, unmet needs, forgotten truths, and it is often through being triggered that the shadow speaks. But when you've done the inner work, something shifts. You no longer fear the trigger, you welcome it, because now you recognize it not as an enemy, but as a mirror, a portal, a gift. Imagine noticing the rising heat in your chest, the tightening in your throat, and instead of reacting, you breathe, you observe, you ask, what is this showing me about myself? That pause, that inner spaciousness, that's where healing lives. Because now, you're not trying to escape the discomfort. You're engaging with it, with curiosity, with compassion. And from that space, wisdom emerges. You'll know you've healed more than you realize when someone says something that once would have shattered you, and instead of collapsing, you reflect. You recognize their words as a reflection of them, not as a definition of you. The wound no longer controls your narrative. The trigger becomes a tool. The lesson becomes integrated. This is inner mastery, not the absence of emotion, but the deepening of awareness. You've rewired your response. And now, instead of seeing your emotional reactions as proof that you're broken, you see them as invitations to grow. That shift from victimhood to conscious participation is the mark of a soul who has remembered its power. There's a certain kind of suffering that doesn't come from the world, but from within, the relentless inner conflict, the voice that says you're not enough, the self-sabotage, the internal tug-of-war between who you are and who you think you should be. But when you've truly healed, that war doesn't just quiet, it ends, not with a bang, but with an undeniable sense of wholeness. Carl Jung believed that the psyche is composed of many parts, some conscious, some hidden in the unconscious. Healing to him was not about perfection but integration. When the shadow is acknowledged and embraced, when the inner child is finally held, when the inner critic is seen with love, the war subsides. The parts stop fighting for control. Harmony replaces hierarchy. This doesn't mean you no longer have doubts or difficult days, but the internal battlefield is no longer your default state. You don't wake up ready to battle yourself. Instead, you feel a kind of inner unity. Your mind, heart, body and soul begin moving in the same direction. There's less inner resistance, more flow, more trust, more coherence. You'll notice the change in how you speak to yourself. The cruel self-talk fades. The guilt no longer governs you. You stop apologizing for your existence. You begin to root into yourself. Your inner world becomes a sanctuary, not a war zone. And that, in and of itself, is a miracle. The world may still misunderstand you, but the difference is, you don't. You're no longer fragmented. You've remembered your essence, and that deep exhale, the one that comes not from relief, but from reunion. That's the sound of someone who's finally come home to themselves. That is the victory of true healing. When healing truly takes root, it doesn't just show up in waking life. It reveals itself in the language of dreams. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious speaks to us in symbols, archetypes, and dream images, often revealing where we are in our journey toward individuation. And one of the most overlooked signs that you've healed more than you realize is the transformation of your dream world. If your dreams used to be filled with chaos, running, falling, screaming, being chased, those were not just random sequences. They were messages from a psyche in survival mode. But when you begin to dream differently, when the symbols become more peaceful, when your dream self begins to choose rather than escape, when you confront fears instead of fleeing them, that's the unconscious signaling integration. Jung referred to certain dream motifs as signs of psychic balance: water turning calm, doors opening with ease, returning home, flying without fear, meeting wise figures or receiving guidance from within. These are all signs that the psyche is no longer fragmented. Healing has woven a new fabric in the unconscious, and the dreamscape reflects it. What's even more profound is when recurring nightmares vanish without force, without intervention. They dissolve because the inner wound that created them has been seen, held, and alchemized. The dream doesn't need to scream for attention anymore. Instead, it becomes a sacred mirror, reflecting not the trauma of the past, but the wholeness of the present. So if you're dreaming of connection, of symbols that inspire instead of haunt, of resolution rather than fear, pay attention. That's not just your imagination, that's your inner world evolving. That's the silent language of healing, because the subconscious doesn't lie. And when it begins to show signs of peace, you know something powerful has shifted. There comes a sacred turning point in the healing journey, when you wake up and realize that your life is no longer revolving around your wounds. The pain that once defined you has become secondary, not because it vanished, but because something more magnetic has emerged in its place: purpose. When you've truly healed, your compass shifts. You're no longer driven by survival. You're drawn by meaning. Carl Jung often spoke of individuation as the process of becoming who you truly are, not who society expects, not who trauma shaped, but who your soul came here to be. When the past no longer holds you hostage, your energy begins to reorient. The same fire that once burned from anguish now fuels your creative force. You begin asking not, "Why did this happen to me?" but what am I here to do with this? You'll feel it in subtle but undeniable ways. A pull towards service, a desire to express, a longing to contribute something real. You stop obsessing over what went wrong and start focusing on what you're building. Your narrative shifts from victimhood to transformation. Your scars become symbols, not of weakness, but of survival, of depth, of wisdom. You realize you've become the medicine you once needed. And here's the most magical part. You no longer need your pain to motivate you. You're no longer using suffering as your fuel. Instead, you're fueled by vision, by inspiration, by resonance with something bigger than yourself. That's not just healing, that's alchemy. That's the moment you turn your inner darkness into a torch that lights the path for others. When your life starts orbiting around purpose, when the pain has served its role as teacher and stepped back, you're no longer just healing, you are transcending. You are reclaiming your energy for creation, for contribution, for soul expression. That is the essence of the awakened life. For most of the unhealed self, the unknown is terrifying. It feels like a void, empty, unpredictable, threatening. But one of the most profound signs that you've truly healed is this. You no longer fear the unknown. In fact, you welcome it. You trust it. You begin to see it not as a threat, but as a sacred field of possibility. The unknown becomes your ally. Carl Jung spoke often of the tension between the known self, the persona, and the greater unconscious forces shaping us. He knew that to grow, we must be willing to enter the mystery. When trauma dominates our lives, uncertainty equals danger. But when healing occurs, the nervous system softens, the hypervigilance fades, and the soul steps forward saying, "I am ready to walk by faith, not fear." This shift is subtle but powerful. You stop needing every detail before you move. You no longer obsess over controlling outcomes. You're okay with not having all the answers. Why? Because now you trust yourself. You've been through storms, you've fallen apart and rebuilt, and you carry a deeper knowing. Whatever comes, you will meet it with presence, not panic. There is an immense freedom in surrendering to the unknown, not as defeat, but as alignment. You begin to feel guided, not lost. You understand that uncertainty is not the enemy of safety, it is the birthplace of transformation. You begin to flow with life rather than resist it. The need for rigid plans softens. The space for miracles expands. And here lies the paradox. The more you trust the unknown, the more life reveals itself to you in magical, unexpected ways. Serendipity returns. Intuition sharpens. The universe meets you halfway. That feeling of safety in the mystery, that's not just emotional growth. That's spiritual maturity. That's the sign of a soul who's no longer trying to control reality because they've remembered they are a co-creator of it. Healing isn't a destination. It's a return to your essence, your truth, your divine rhythm. The fact that you recognize these signs means something extraordinary. You've already begun the journey home. You're no longer operating from the wounds of who you were, but from the wisdom of who you're becoming. Carl Jung believed that every shadow faced becomes a source of light. And now you hold that light, quietly, powerfully. You walk differently, think differently, choose differently, not because you're pretending to be healed, but because you've earned this peace. You've walked through fire and emerged not just unburned, but reborn. So take a breath. Honor how far you've come. Trust what's unfolding. And remember this, when the inner war ends, creation begins. You are no longer bound by the past. You are free to create a future aligned with your soul's highest frequency. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, like a truth you've always known but forgotten, like the echo of your higher self calling you forward, then let this be your confirmation. Like this video, subscribe to the Cosmic Awakening channel and step further into the path of your becoming.